they think that Odd Rogue is a must-bring to almost every tournament because of how good it is against everything else, and more importantly, how it punishes strategies that try to be weird a little bit. So this is pretty interesting to see that even though Muzzy and Hunterace have very similar ideas, it seems like they took a little bit of a different approach here, and you can see that Muzzy's respecting the Paladin too with that ban.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the case where just Hunterace has never really brought just the standard stuff to the tournament. A lot of times he will bring something a little bit different, and you see him get pretty rewarded for that. I know that, and a lot of times when he did win those tournaments, he would bring Big Spell Mage at a time that nobody else was playing that deck, and he would play it absolutely flawlessly.
Absolutely. Well, flawless Prince Kelasev on 2, but this is kind of what the Hunter deck is excelled at. It's specifically good at killing Druid right now, which is something we talked about at length yesterday. But more importantly was quite possibly the middling performance of Druid across the board. Not just Malygos Druid, but Token Druid and, well, Mechathune Druid. They were all struggling a little bit on screen.
Might have been because of the play a couple times there.
Yeah.
So Muzzy is playing 2 Stitch Trackers, and this card did get a little bit better because now with the way Keleseth got changed, or the way Stitch Tracker gets changed, you actually get a copy of the buffed minion, which didn't used to be the case.
Yeah, there was a patch several months ago that introduced more consistency to copies of cards will keep any buff or changes. And specifically that got, you know, our old Uncle Savitz before he kind of tailored it off to wherever he is now. Really excited about things like Azalina Soul Thief, because then if you like copy Shutterwalk, you would retain a 1 mana as opposed to be 9 mana still. And that also applies to things like Stitch Tracker. This is, I think, one of the important ways for Hunterace to win this game, which is Twig of the World Tree. I feel like it is probably one of the only ways that Druid can reliably beat the Hunter, because you can just overwhelm them or finally answer a giant board that you usually can't answer because of all the Devasaur eggs and the giant minions that come out of cubes.
For sure. If you give Hunter too much time in this matchup, they're just going to make a board with Cube that you just cannot deal with unless it's with Malygos and Swipe. So just having that Twig on curve means that at some point, Malygos Druid just can sometimes kill you out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I think Hunterace was one of the first people to kind of push Malygos Druid to its ultimate limits by experimenting with its tech. Hunterace was one of the first people I saw playing Azalina Soul Thief and like trying to do the crazy Malygos Togwaggle combos.
Oh yeah.
And now it seems like he's settled on the more standard list compared to some people who are innovating with the Faceless Manipulator. But perhaps he values consistency as opposed to the combo explosiveness out of that.
That's one of the really cool things just about the deck in general. Despite it being one of the most popular decks, people have yet to come to an agreement what they think is right. It's always meta-dependent, trying to fin a couple cards to try and gain that edge on the metagame.
I like that. I think if the metagame's going to be as settled as it has been recently for the past few months, in terms of like what people have understood to be good and bad, and don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of room for evolution in what people are playing. But I think one thing that's cool is that at the very least, make it so that's hard to predict exactly what's the best list. If everyone's playing the same 30 out of 30 cards, I don't think it'd be nearly as fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree for sure. Just when you get to actually make real decisions in deck building,
yeah,
that's just a really fun thing for it to matter.
Yeah, and the thing is too, and Hearthstone is like one of the card games that has like the least card requirements for a deck. You know, you usually see like 45, 60 cards in some other games. Hearthstone has 30, so even changing 2 or 3 cards can have a massive difference on your win rate. So don't underestimate just like, 2 card difference from the stock lists. Anyways, more about this game. Muzzy's gonna he's gonna start to put on a ton of pressure, but Hunterace is getting close to finishing that Twig combo.
Yeah, Hunterace actually went for a pretty interesting play. Most people would have went for the Nourish, Wild Growth, double Arcane Tyrant there, but he decided that he does not want to leave a Witchwood Grizzly up and decided to use that Spellstone to clean it up because he's afraid of that getting cubed.
Yeah, exactly what ended up happening, which is the cube play, but there was no play dead, so there's no ability for Muzzy to go too wide, even if there was that cube. And now Hunterace, on the last charge, can finally make a big push, but here's like one of the big problems too, is that as great as Twig of the Willow Tree is to give you 10 extra mana crystals, sometimes your hand doesn't really have much to do after it.
Yeah, one of the nice things, he does have that Nourish to maybe go for the card draw, play those Arcane Tyrants, and then maybe find something like an Ultimate Infestation. You always do have just these crazy swing turns when you have the Twig at 1.
And the play dead comes into hand, but remember there's Devil Sword eggs that are 0-3s that don't really do very much, specifically against Druid. Druid would be more than happy for Muzzy to actually fill up his own board with eggs that he can't kill.
Yeah, and Muzzy actually does not play Mossy Heart in this deck because sometimes it's okay to go in on the eggs because then if you get Spreading Plague, you could have that crazy blowout turn with the Mossy Heart. But with Muzzy not including Mossy Heart in the deck, it's going to be the case where he's really going to hold on to this play dead. You don't want to just make these eggs.
Yep. Can, however, use play dead just for a single 5/5, which would increase the power on his board. And I like that. I think every play Muzzy has in mind is how can I put on the most pressure.
Yeah, especially when you just see that twig up, you do not want to give them too much time.
Yeah. And now, Hunterace has the ability to snap Twig. Does have some pretty powerful swing potential if he picks up Malygos. Not to mention double Arcane Tyrant. I mean, his hand has a lot of potential, and he picks up Malygos.
Is that going to make him want to try and hold off on this Twig swing? He doesn't really have anything in the hand immediately to take advantage of the mana. Oh, and stealing a 5/5 is going to reduce the pressure by so much.
Yeah. And it looks like Hunterace is going to go for the snap, because he can play pretty much anything he wants. Is this a second Mind Control tech coming out? I was thinking about if he just wanted to play Malygos for maximum tempo, but I guess you're afraid of losing Malygos really easy to Hunter's Mark and other shenanigans like Spider Bomb.
Yeah, I think he wants to put himself in a position where he's not dead to Katharina pulling out a Charged Devil Sword or a King Crush.
Oh! What is going on?
Those are the good ones. He started this this turn with no board.
Yeah.
And now Muzzy is staring at a board that he straight cannot deal with.
What just happened? He's playing Token Druid now. He's got a little Noah's Ark action going on. Everything coming onto the board 2x2.
That's the thing about Malygos Druid, man.
What?
It doesn't only have that one win condition. Sometimes you could just have these crazy turns. Who needs a Malygos swipe when you could just make this board on turn 8?
Yeah, so this is the reason why I know Hunterace and his practice group, I believe they call themselves the Dusky Boys, really loved Malygos Druid because your win condition can change every single game you play. Muzzy concedes, and he didn't even play a single...
He cannot compete with that 18 mana turn.
Yeah, he didn't play like any of his big top-end cards like Malygos or Alexstrasza or Lich King. Didn't need any of that. Just straight up double Mind Control tech with the Arcane Tyrants. And I love the extra touch, too, with the branching paths preemptively. That was a really nice way to put the extra pressure on Muzzy in case he tries to go for any big trade. And that ends up causing a pretty important matchup, I'd say, because Hunter's supposed to kill the Druid.
Yeah, a lot of times you just make those crazy boards that they can't deal with, but that was quite the swing turn.
Yeah. Now, granted, I feel like even if he didn't steal the 5/5s and he got the eggs and buffed the eggs, it still would have been a really fearsome board to deal with. But
yeah,
Muzzy would have been able to put on a lot more pressure, which could have changed the dynamic of things. But no matter what happened, I don't think Muzzy would have been able to have enough damage to finish the game, even if he didn't steal the 5/5s. Because
yeah, I think Muzzy would have been in this situation where he'd had to start making trades, and then maybe he could stay in the game if Hunterace, say, doesn't draw a UI. But once that UI comes down, he would have lost that game anyway. So although he was very fortunate with those Mind Control techs, he was already in a great position.
Yep, and then, so, you know, a lot of people might look at, wow, Hunterace, yeah, he's the best player because he's, like, the most lucky of them all. It's like, well, I mean, he also had...
a combination.
I mean, yeah, first of all, if you have to have the success, you have to be really, really good and also fortunate at times. But he also had Dream Petaflorist and Malygos guaranteed. So it's like, you know, picks up the thing. The moment he picks up a swipe, I mean, that's also game 2. So it was a very crazy swing. And we're going to go into game number 2 with Shutterwalk Shaman Mirrors. Oh, boy. All right, so let's look at the deck list difference here.
We see that Muzzy again. He really has this Prince Keleseth stuff figured out.
And that's right. He had a Keleseth start.
I still think that maybe 80% of the games that I've casted this tournament, they've just had the Prince Keleseth. And last game, it wasn't even enough.
Well, that's another thing, too. I've been noticing a lot of people, whenever I see them have Keleseth on 2, they've been losing a lot. Even on my ladder experience, my opponent has Keleseth on 2 a lot, but yet, for some reason, doesn't feel nearly as game-defining as it has been. I think it could be the fact that things like Shutterwalk Shaman, Keleseth's a lot less important than, say, Zoo Warlock.
Yeah, for
where,
sure.
like, if they play Keleseth on 2 for Zoo, you're like, oh, I think I'm just going to die. But with I mean, Shutterwalk Shaman, it doesn't really matter if Grumble's like an 8-8 versus a 7-7, nearly as impactful as having those, you know, free happy goals at 4-4.
Yeah, the biggest thing for Shaman is just getting that chain gang buffed up, which is something that Hunter doesn't even have. Hunter definitely utilizes the Keleseth the least well. The best, you know, thing that they have going for them is that Stitch Tracker, and we saw that last game, but it still wasn't as valuable as he could have wanted it to be.
All right, so from the first glance, it looks like the only difference between this deck list is a Gluttonous Ooze versus a Zilliax. Muzzy has that Zilliax, and Hunterace is a little bit better versus things like the Twig and the Skull Minari with the Gluttonous Ooze. But both are a little bit on the greedier side with Prince Keleseth and Sandbinder to help cycle through your deck a little bit faster.
I'm actually pretty surprised that Muzzy did not include any weapon destruction in his deck. It makes you very weak to Malagos Druid, where otherwise you could have a lot of game in that matchup. I know it was the case that in his last series he ended up winning that matchup due to Electra plus a Lightning Storm to push through a big board after a Spreading Plague, and he did like express to me that he is very unfavored in that matchup, so he got a little bit fortunate to win it.
Right, and he's not even necessarily banning the Malagos Druid because he has like Hunter in his lineup, so he feels okay against it. It is interesting. It's a pretty noticeable gap in his planning if that ends up being the case, but we'll see. I mean, Malagos Druid's already checked off, so he doesn't have to worry about that.
And whenever I watch a Shutterwalk Shaman game, I always think that there's no way that a Shutterwalk could fail. And then there's always just these situations where their hand gets a little bit too full, a little bit too many minions on board.
Yeah.
Just crazy things can happen.
I kind of like this play from Hunterace. You know, part of the thing about combo mirrors is your resources and how well everything lines up. So having more card draw is not a bad thing. So Farsight, you'll always draw a card off of that, but having additional sources of, you know, resources, for Mana Tide is really important.
And I actually think one of the best uses of Electra in this matchup is to pair it with that Farsight.
Oh yeah, that's pretty good. I like it.
A lot of times you just want to cycle through your deck. A lot of times whoever gets that, you know, combo created first is going to win the game.
Yeah, and sometimes you get some really wonky stuff with like really cheap Shutterwalks or cheap Grumbles, and you can like bounce back stuff really easily.
This matchup would be way more fun if one of them was playing Azalina. Then things would just get absolutely nuts.
Is that so? If one player has an Azalina, does that mean that one player can never really play Shutterwalk, or the other player can't play Shutterwalk, because then you get Azalina for really cheap Shutterwalks to answer right back?
Yeah, I would imagine that the game would
so
get
that's just a
very
stalemate.
ridiculous very fast.
Well, thankfully, because we have a schedule to maintain, not like yesterday, that's not the case.
We tried to make it so all the odd warriors would lose. They were holding up the tournament.
I mean, I don't think Muzzy's read necessarily with his deck list is that far off. I mean, there is a lot of aggro at this tournament with odd decks kind of coming back in full force. Well, having Zilliax compared to Gluttonous Ooze isn't necessarily that poor of a choice, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like that's the big reason that people love Shutterwalk Shaman is just, you know, as a concept, it does well against aggro, and it goes right into that anti-control lineup because you have the finisher with Shutterwalk.
Yeah.
And then the people who don't like it just doesn't think it's nearly as good in those matchups as the other people do.
And it looks like Muzzy also has that same thing you were talking about in mind, which is Electra Storm Surge and I was going to say Mind Control tech. Electra Storm Surge and Farsight, and choosing not to Hero Power to avoid that Mind Control tech.
Yeah, a lot of times as Shutterwalk Shaman, you really don't want to Hero Power probably like 80% of the time. You see that as big misplay. Even sometimes against aggro, you'll see that your totem just counteracts what you're trying to do, trying to go for that Volcano. And Hunterace realizing that drawing 2 is exactly what he wants to do as well.
Muzzy has the opportunity to do the same. Although, one thing that's been kind of nice for Muzzy is that his card draw has been a lot more consistent because that Mana Tide survived for 2 turns now.
It's also just a big deal, like him having that Prince Keleseth on curve, now that he gets these value trades rather than the minions just trading and dying.
It does coincidentally leave enough minions on the board for Mind Control Tech to potentially swing a little bit if it, say, takes the Mana Tide Totem and gives Hunterace an extra draw. But I don't think it'll be the most impactful if it takes anything else.
I would also have to imagine that this is a matchup that you probably just never want to play Hagatha. A lot of times Hagatha can make it so that dumping cards out of your hand is very difficult. A lot of times you sort of want to keep a little bit of a lower hand size so that your Shutterwalk does get returned.
Yep. Can agree there. Hunterace also drew Sandbinder, which, let me see. He has the Glacial Shards and he has the Grumble. So still has room to pick up. Oh, takes the Frog, which I guess absorbs the attack. So in the end, it's good they can eliminate the Mana Tide Totem.
You can't always take the best one. Sometimes you'll take the Frog.
Yeah.
It balances out.
I mean, I think that's probably the second best option, to be honest. I think the life totals, unless you're like in the low teens, don't really matter that much.
Yeah, you would have to get a really wide board to actually just beat someone down in this matchup, just because the access to things like Lightning Storm and Volcano means winning with a board is very difficult.
And now Muzzy can strike back with his own MCT, but it doesn't feel that great. I guess Muzzy will draw first, and this could either land on Grumble or the Glacial Shards.
I know that Muzzy is a player that he will always take the time at the start of the turn to try and figure out exactly what he's doing with all his mana, than, say, just going for a play saying, like, oh, I'm definitely going to do this, and then trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that was a nice snipe there from Muzzy. That was probably the best case scenario for that MC tech, because I don't imagine you want any other minions. There is a little bit of shenaniganry that happens if your opponent is desperate and grumbles like some of the minions back, so you have to be mindful of it. But most people want to grumble the Shadow Knight Chain Gang to increase their chances of having Shutterwalk land on the Grumble Battlecry.
Right. And we see so much minion combat going down, but ultimately none of it really mattered. Just going to cleaned up by the Volcano there.
Yeah, it's jockeying for position, to be honest. Like, so what Muzzy does by doing this is force Hunterace to remove, and also potentially gives him the opportunity to pressure. Like, if Hunterace doesn't have that Volcano or Lightning Storm by any off chance, Muzzy could have generated like 15 points of damage, and that would have put Hunterace under the gun.
Are you saying they don't always have the Volcano? In my experience,
they really don't, especially if I'm playing it. I mean, I don't have the Volcano ever. I have the Lightning Storm that deals 2 damage to everything.
But Muzzy does have, pretty decent refill here. It's going to be, that awkward board where you don't really want to commit another removal spell to it, but you also can't ignore it for too long. It's interesting to see that he's holding back that Life Drinker. Maybe he wants to play that in the same turn as Grumble?
Could be. I mean, Life Drinker is also one of those things where, because it's 1 mana, you can fit in with a lot of stuff. You can fit in with Shutterwalk. You could do it in the same turn as Zola and play another Life Drinker.
It also just shows how much he does not value the onboard pressure in this matchup.
It really doesn't matter that much.
And Acolyte of Pain, by far the best Hex target in this matchup. A lot of times you just have the Volcano to deal with the Grumble, and just cutting off the card draw is exactly what you want to do.
Yeah. On the converse side, sometimes you save the Volcano for your Acolyte, so you can draw as deep as you want in the deck. So Hex certainly looks like to be the case here.
I wonder if that's ever a consideration to just hold your Acolyte, as you said, to pair it with that. That could be that Hunterace feels like he's just in a position where he has to go for it here if he feels behind in the matchup, that you start to have to take risks. Because Hunterace is truly not working with much in his hand. These Healing Rains just might as well be dead.
Yeah, I think in this position, Hunterace doesn't actually have anything good. He could Grumble to get the maximum board presence and also get the battle cry, but kind of what we're talking about, no Serenite Chain Gangs being played yet means Hunterace will be minimizing his percentages to get the Shutterwalk combo off. Assuming he even gets to that point, because I think he's very far behind the card draw.
Yeah, ideally in this matchup, you really do want to, play 3 or 4 Chain Gangs rather than just the 2.
Yeah, it's tough. And also Hunterace used Zola too, so that's one other possibility. that gets thrown out, because if you have Zola, then Zola is like your saving grace. I don't know if that's going to be the case. Also funny that the frog normally costs 0, but it costs 1 in that spot. At the same time, it's not like Muzzy's developing very much either. I mean, you kind of mentioned how bad Hagatha is, but...
Yeah, I think he's pretty okay going for the Volcano here. A lot of times you don't want to leave this Grumble up, and that's just because if the Grumble's on board, then if you play Shutterwalk, it will guarantee bounce it back to your hand, even though... Actually, it wouldn't be the case because he hasn't played a single Chain Gang yet.
Oh, Chain Gang finally comes to the hand here for Hunterace. I believe the mind control techs have been played out, or perhaps only one of them. It would be very annoying if your opponent mind control teched and then grumbled back one of your Serenade Chain Gangs in the hand to increase their chances.
I'm actually pretty surprised by the way Hunterace has been playing this. We see him, 2 turns now in a row trying to apply pressure, but I feel like it's almost the case that if he passed those turns, how much development would Muzzy have had to start, pressuring Hunterace? He could have maybe just had the position where if he passes a couple turns, it just could be okay. And if you do take that damage, you have the Healing Rains to then deal with it. Maybe he's just thinking that he only has the Lightning Storm in hand.
Yeah, that is true. Healing Rain gives you a lot of opportunity to buy time. You can take 12 points of damage and then just heal it back as if nothing ever happened.
And the Chain Gangs both making an appearance at the same time.
Well,
nice and buffed up.
The important thing is Muzzy saved his Zola, so now he can play Serenade Chain Gang and Zola another Serenade Chain Gang to his hand, and I think that's kind of the ideal spot for Zola to be used if it's not used directly for game-ending combos.
And I think that's the play for sure, just because even if you see, say, like a double Lightning Storm come out, which actually isn't even possible now that Electra and 1 copy is gone, I guess there's always the possibility of Spell Power Totem and high rolling to push through. Muzzy just has that Volcano in hand to then clear the board.
Maybe that's another thing to consider. Gluttonous Zeus doesn't do anything in the mirror. Yeah, talk about trying to squeeze every ounce of value. Healing Rain not doing much. Hunterace forced to go wide on the board and hope that he can find other card draw or potentially a Shutterwalk. The good news for Hunterace is that everything... Oh, boy. But
so Muzzy is not yet defined that Grumble, so
yeah.
He has to wait a little bit. He's probably going to save this Chain Gang to then play with the Grumble, to then both play Sirenites, because he's in the position where he has a lot of the time. He doesn't really feel the need to take these risks right now. I'd also be just curious to see where these guys are at in their deck lists, how many cards they have left, because that's always a very big, important factor in this matchup, how much you are cycling through your deck.
I mean, kind of what we were saying before, Hunterace has all the pieces invested in the pool, so hypothetically, it's just going to, if everything lines up perfectly, he'd still be completely okay. He has 1 Serenite, 1...
Has he played a Life Drinker?
I think so, didn't he? I could be mistaken.
Seeing all the Shutterwalk Shaman cards, it's hard to keep track.
Sure, but let's assume that he has one of everything. It still could go pretty well for him, but it would have to happen pretty soon too, because even if you do get the Shutterwalk combos off, your opponent can outpace you with better Shutterwalks if they're having like multiple Life Drinkers, or a better board if they Shutterwalk, because there's still 6/6s that are existing on the board after you play it.
Yeah, sometimes that even if you do have that 1 Life Drinker, like ideally you can do 30 in a turn, but it's very hard to play all 10 Shutterwalks.
What a pickup here from Muzzy too. Getting a 1-mana Serenade Chain Gang and 1-mana Life Drinker invested back into the pool. This is looking very bad for Hunterace. His window is closing very rapidly. MCT.
So is there any way that Muzzy's Shutterwalk can fail with having too many minions on the board? Is that ever a factor?
That's an interesting one for sure. I don't know off the top of my head.
I think he's probably well over, 80% to have this Shutterwalk. succeed just because he played so many chain gangs, and he just needs one to go off. He also has that Zola as well, so the Zola and the Grumble would both need to come before any of the chain gangs.
Oh, is Hunterace not going to hex this Grumble?
Well, now I think that's the case. If the Grumble stays up, it's just guaranteed.
The hex is 1 mana.
Oh yeah, it is 1 mana hex. That's a good point. Yeah, we can't see that number at the top.
Yeah.
But I would have to imagine that. You know,
okay.
that Muzzy feels pretty comfortable going for it here.
Yeah.
All right, there's one of the effects. Now he needs the Zola to come after the chain gang.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. You remember at the start of the match when I said whenever I think Shutterwalk can't fail?
Yeah.
It just, you know, it finds a way.
Yeah, I forget.
But this is okay, though, because 4 7/7s on the board is still very, very good.
Yeah, it's still a lot of pressure. There's no, like, Hagatha in the Battlecry pool to, like, destroy the board. There's mind control techs. There's also a lot of junk on the field. Actually, not really. You can trade one of them.
Hunterace really wishes that he didn't have these frogs on the board. They're just taking up room, so the mind control tech's a little bit worse.
Exactly.
But he still could potentially take 2 here and have it succeed himself.
Nope. Oh, the Saturday Night Chain Gang lands before the Grumble.
Yeah, he's just going to die to the board, right?
Unless he freezes
he can
the
play another
7/7s.
Shutterwalk.
Yeah, he can steal Shutterwalk and freeze another
Throw it
one.
in. How are you supposed to know what's going on when this happens? A lot of things are getting frozen. Is Hunterace just ahead now?
I think so.
Yeah, he gets the chance to just play another here. And Muzzy doesn't have, you know, Grumble or Zola left in the deck to say bounce these back for himself. This was wild.
Well, that's just kind of what the mirror is in a nutshell. Like, it comes down to the Shutterwalk's activations. And right now, the puzzle falls onto Muzzy's shoulder. Like, how does he solve this situation? And Hunterace gonna have discipline to not pull the trigger on his other Shutterwalks. Instead, lets Muzzy have the right to respond.
All right, so now Muzzy, what he needs to do to win this game is go Hagatha into Blazing Invocation into Shutterwalk for himself.
Sure.
And that is probably less than 1%. After being in a position where his Shutterwalk was so likely to succeed.
Right. There was 3 Saturday Night Chain Gangs of Zola in the pool.
I think there was there more than 3 chain gangs?
Well, he had his own that he copied, and then he played another one. Oh, actually, you're right. There's 4, right? Because the Grumble bounce bone back, too.
Yeah, I think so.
So there's 4 Saturday Night Chain Gangs plus a Zola in the pool.
And he just needed one to go off first.
Right,
It was
before.
pretty unfortunate for him that his Zola did end up hitting that mind control tech as well.
Yeah. It's Hagatha time.
And as you said, you know, although Hunterace did not have a lot of resources in hand, he did play all the cards prior, so once he did find that Shutterwalk, he would just be able to pop off with it.
Yeah. On the one hand, it's kind of like, well, you're never truly out in the Shutterwalk mirror because there's always a possibility of failure. On the other hand, when it does fail, man, what do you even do? And Hunterace could also just win from this spot, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's much that Muzzy can do from here. I don't think that his Shutterwalk can fail twice.
Because this guarantees that because he has 2 Shutterwalks, it guarantees that he's able to bounce it back, and then he can just keep playing 1-mana Shutterwalks for just game-ending damage.
Yep.
I think this is just it. I think Hunterace also kind of relaxing a little bit. Now I've been focusing on what the Battlecry order is because it doesn't really matter as much.
You remember when this used to take, you know, around 20 minutes to resolve? That was pretty great. Thankfully, they sped up the animations, and now you get to watch Muzzy die over the course of, say, 3 minutes instead. So what a way for this game to finish. We saw so many turns where Muzzy just looked to have the advantage, but Hunterace just stuck in it. You know, tried to buy time by just playing his minions onto the board.
Yeah.
And he just got there.
We also see that Muzzy has finally lost a Shutterwalk Shaman.
Yeah, this is his first loss.
Yeah.
And, man, if this wasn't on stream, you get a detailed story
on Twitter.
How the Shutterwalk failed and how unlucky it exactly was.
So that would mean the last remaining deck here for Hunterace is Odd Rogue, and that is probably the worst case scenario here for Muzzy, because I feel like, given that his Shutterwalk Shaman isn't heavily geared towards anti-aggro besides that Ziliax tech, his best matchup might be the mirror.
I gotta say, maybe Shutterwalk is the most recognized battle cry now. How could you not remember what he says after a game like this?
Oh, I dream about that, or nightmares rather.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine the whole chat right now is just Shutterwalk's phrase.
Yeah, or maybe a resident sleeper or two.
You don't think this is a nice hype moment?
Well,
this is what people live for.
It's the fact that it keeps going on, and more importantly, that Muzzy hasn't conceded. Like, I think the game was 100% determined at that point, but Muzzy just lets it play out.
Yeah, he's actually asleep in that chair. You can't see his eyes right now, but they are fully closed.
Oh, he's awake. He just can't feel anything. Just look at him. He hasn't even budged. Look at Hunterace. He's like moving, rubbing his nose. Muzzy's still staring at the screen as if it's still going on.
Maybe it is. The animations do go a little bit longer for your opponent than yourself.
Oh, hell exists, all right. It's being locked in a never-ending battle cry.
Who just got Shutterwalked.
All right, Hunterace up 2-0. Has his Odd Rogue remaining. Muzzy has to sweep Odd Rogue, and that is tough because Odd Rogue is one of the best matchup spreads in the game, in my opinion. Even the matchups that it's considered unfavored against, it still has a pretty good fighting chance because of the early game burst. Well, he's going to go to Shutterwalk Shaman, so perhaps he feels like this is one of his better matchups to fight Odd Rogue against.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the case that even if you are favored in every single matchup, it is still so hard to reverse sweep someone.
Yeah. Apologies, actually, he went with his Hunter. Potentially just saying, you know what? This is my worst matchup. Just play it. If I lose, I have to win it anyways. Get over it. Get over with, excuse me.
I know this is a matchup that Muzzy feels like, although according to the stats, is pretty bad for Hunter. He says he wins it a bunch, but I'm pretty surprised because he says that despite just playing 2 Stitch Trackers in his deck. That can't be good in this matchup, and we actually see another player pass up on Prince Keleseth, realizing how much more valuable that egg is when you have the activator in the hand.
Dude, do you realize that Muzzy, all 3 games would have Prince Keleseth on 2 available to him?
If he wanted it.
If he wanted it.
And he's just still losing.
If he didn't have any activator for the egg, I mean, you could argue that maybe Keleseth would have been the better pick, but against Odd Rogue, which pretty much invalidates any 2 health minions early on, it's just not a very good fit.
Man, Hunterace can kill both part of these eggs here, which is a play that a lot of times if you have the option to do that, going for it as Odd Rogue, being able to slow down them not making the free 5/5s is such a great play.
Well, that's the way Hunter wins this matchup, is to make those 5/5s. And when your opponent trackings and coins out the Dinosaur egg that he tracked, I think there's a pretty strong
good read. Yeah, for sure.
The only thing is that this is such an unconventional route because a lot of people autopilot Clan Thug here instead of the double deadly poison. I mean, it's not even necessarily an Og Rogue thing. This is kind of like a rogue thing in general. You just want to deny your opponent the ability to develop.
And I really do like that play of going with the deckhand, popping the egg, and just smacking that 5/5 with your face.
Hunterace also does this a lot, by the way. When he spots a play that's very unconventional and a little bit cool, he tends to do exactly this. He like kind of balls up and is like, oh my gosh, should I do it? Should I do it? It's so great because I feel like, you know, as much as he's one of the most experienced players these days, he also I feel like he wears his feelings on his sleeves compared to someone like Muzzy.
I agree.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of ways for Rogue to kill both parts there. A lot of times they rely on something like Cold Blood. Has to be a pretty specific answer, and that's part of the reason why Muzzy decided to go for that egg rather than Prince Keleseth there.
Ziliax could potentially be a big MVP in this game if it's able to absorb and get a lot of good trades. More specifically, if Muzzy can survive that onslaught, because the thing about this double deadly poison is that it kind of pushes a lot of tempo into 1 or 2 turns as opposed to spread out over the course of 4 turns for value. And, I mean, at this point, Hunterace has like a lot of damage.
Oh, yeah. And this is actually a pretty interesting turn to think about. Okay, so if you swing the deckhand and do that trade, you're playing around Mind Control Tech, and also you can just push this 6 damage to face to then also play around Flanking Strike. So I'd much rather see this dagger go face. And then that doesn't feel good. What? I'm very surprised by that.
I don't know about that one, man. I know Hunterace is one of the best players in the world. Oh, man, if he takes the Southsea deckhand, now it has charge.
I just feel like he could have just put himself in a position where he just was not weak to Mind Control Tech, not weak to Flanking Strike, and just pushes more damage in the process.
Oh my
And if Muzzy, say, took that Clan Thug, that could have been a pretty big punish there, but luckily for Hunterace, did not get it stolen.
It's still kind of a punish, though, because of the Ziliax. So if he attacks this Henchclan Thug, the most health he can have next turn is 4 anyways. And then he can Ziliax plus attack, unless there's a Tar Creeper involved. In which case, if so, he might feel incentivized to trade preemptively into the Henchclan Thug in the event where he draws Flanking Strike and needs to answer it. That's pretty corner case, I'd say.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear his opinion on that play at some point, just because when players, of such a high caliber make plays like this, it's half the time where they have, something in mind that you're not thinking of, and then other times it would just be like, oh yeah, that wasn't good, and who knows what this one was.
No, I mean, players like Hunterace are not brainless whatsoever. They put a lot of thought into every single play they make. I mean, he even thought about it for a good 10, 15 seconds. Should I even trade into this 2-2? And he did, and I'm trying to search for a reason why he would do that. But I think with Fungal Mancer in hand, he felt like, okay, what's the best way I can, if my opponent clears the board, can I guarantee 2 minions?
That's something that you're almost always considering as Adro, just because hitting 2 minions with Fungal Mancer is just so good.
Yeah, and now Hunterace, because he lost that 6 damage, is so low on resources because he invested so much into that double deadly poison play, that he's contemplating if he can even afford to miss this 3 damage, when Muzzy realistically should be at 4 points lower. He should be at 16 right now, if he went with our line, of course.
Yeah, I think the one thing that he's thinking about is, does Muzzy do this trade anyway? Because with that Candle Shot equipped, he might just think it's likely that this Mind Control tech goes into the Flame Elemental anyway.
There's also
the punish could be, say, like a Flanking Strike being paired to then take out the Henchclan Thug, so that's what he's going to play around here. Yeah,
and he also saw Stitch Tracker. And the best 5-mana play in almost any scenario is Ziliax. So if Ziliax comes out, this is the best way to protect this Henchclan Thug, so well done.
So Hunterace is really going to need a 1-drop to pair with this Vile Spine off the top, or else this thing is going to just slow down the game so much. And Muzzy has great tools to then stabilize with the Ziliax, Rexar, and Katharina. And Cold Blood, that's good enough. It doesn't need to be, comboed. Just using that to then use the Vile Spine Slayer to take out the Switchwood Grizzly is exactly what he needed here.
Yeah, what do you attach it to the Henchclan Thug and kind of make it just unstoppable force, or do you spread out the threat so that way if your opponent has that removal piece, you can make it more awkward? Looks like Hunterace is opting for all-inning on the Henchclan Thug.
Yeah, I like this just because you're not in a great position if he has, Hunter's Mark anyways, so play around things like the Ziliax being able to clear out a little bit more damage. So this would be a little bit less awkward if he just had 1 more mana to do the 2 activations on the Spider Bomb.
Right.
But as it is, I feel like he might just have to go for a Ziliax play.
Ziliax gains him 6 life in the ideal scenario.
A little bit more than that because he'll have to trade a minion in.
Right. Or his dagger.
Yeah, that's true. So then it's more like 8.
Yeah. 8 with 10 on the board. Actually, with 11 because the Henchclan Thug gets buffed. Here we go.
And Muzzy just thinks the Ziliax play isn't good enough, and he's going to check if it killed the Henchclan Thug by trying to target it with the Candle Shot. And as soon as he sees it did not kill it, Muzzy is going to dip out of the game. And do you know what that series taught me? For all the people at home that say they cannot beat Prince Keliseth, well, apparently Hunterace can.
He just beat it 3 times.